It's Dr. Parker. I'm going to go over your Knight's Tale responses. This is my second attempt because of some screaming children, so you'll excuse me if I try to get it moving quickly because I'm having to start over again here. Um, I'm going to start with series. I'm always starting with the first person to respond, and that may or may not be what you want because I know that the responses get less detailed as I go on, but that's largely because of repetition in what I'm doing. And I don't want to sort of bore you with repeating everything for everybody's responses. But if you feel like you're getting short shrift or you'd like me to start with your response or something like that in future, please let me know. This is all new to me, and I'm kind of learning as I go along. So if this is not working best for you, I need to know that. But anyway, question number 1 is about Theseus and Hippolyta. And Sarah said, Theseus, from the way I read the text, it appears he steals her from her home. Yeah, this is the mythological Theseus and Hippolyta. Hippolyta is the queen of the Amazon. She's actually a warrior queen. And Theseus has gone to war with her country and defeated them. So it's very much the case in this tale that men win women. Their objects, their prizes, their possessions to be fought for pretty much regardless of what they might want, of what the women might want. Certainly, yes, this influences his decision to let the cousins fight over Emily, because to him that's standard operating procedure. When you want a woman, that's what you do, is you fight for her and you win her. And I think that spills over a little bit into number 2, which is the question, do you have any sympathy for either of the cousins, for Palamon or Arcita? And you've said, if they were more reasonable and, quote, modern men who gave thought to a woman's perspective, I could give them more sympathy. But it's hard to, and I agree, I think this tale is very difficult for 21st century people to feel much connection, I guess, with the guys. It's romantic in the most very old-fashioned traditional kind of way, in that they fall in love at first sight, but everything else about it is it's hard to relate to. And I do think that there's a degree to which this is Chaucer deconstructing the courtly love ideal, because he's saying that the women are objects. They don't have personhood. And despite the fact, the paradox of courtly love is that the woman is the object of the most veneration and desire and value, but at the same time, she's not a person. I mean, she is an object. So even though she's put on this very elevated position, she's put on this pedestal, but she's put on a pedestal in the way that you would put, a vase on a pedestal, or a work of art, not something you would do to a person. And I think Chaucer's at least a little bit conscious of this. I don't think that he's completely a product of his time, because in other places we see him write strong women. And I think even the way he treats Emily I think we're supposed to feel for her maybe a little bit more than the knight feels for her. The knight probably thinks that she ought to be honored, to be competed for. I don't know that Chaucer really expects us to feel that way. Number 3, I can't even remember what question number 3 is. Let's see what you said here. Could it be that the knight's attitude towards women is different because he is a Christian? Yeah, right. How much of this sort of non-personhood of Emily is coming from the knight, and how much is it coming from Chaucer? And I guess we were kind of getting at that at the last question a little bit too. Here you've written, in the knight stories that I've heard from King Arthur's day, the thoughts of the women are important to the knight who pursues her. I guess maybe it depends on which story. Guinevere is kind of an exception in Arthurian literature, and Guinevere is also kind of a bad woman in most versions of the story. It depends on which Arthur story you're talking about. But in Malory, certainly she is problematic. If nothing else. And in other versions, she's just flat out wicked. I think Sir Gawain and the Green Knight's the only Arthurian story I can think of where Guinevere bears no blame whatsoever. But in general, is the knight something that we don't really know, but we can speculate on, is because the knight's a Christian and because the knights in the story are pagan, might the knight have a different attitude towards women than the guys in the story? And I think that's possible, but I also think it's difficult for us to know. um, so question number 4, I must have misfired on it because I'm not sure that you all were reading it the same way that I was. Emetreus and Lycurgus or Lycurgus are supposed to be from one's from India and one's from Thracia, so they're supposed to be from the east. So I pulled up these descriptions because what I was really getting at in terms of their exoticism is to kind of point out how what a weird and wrong understanding that Chaucer had of anything in the Eastern world and everybody in Chaucer's society. So here's this Lycurgus, who's supposed to be the king of Thracia. And here we read, there you may see, coming with Palamon, Lycurgus himself, the great king of Thracia. Black was his beard and manly was his face. The circle of his eyes and his head, they glowed between yellow and red. So he has glowing sort of orange eyes, like some kind of strange demon or something. And he looked around like a griffin with curly hairs on his stout brows, great limbs. His muscles were hard and strong. He had broad shoulders, big arms, and as was the custom in his country, he was on a golden chariot that was being pulled by 4 white bulls. And instead of armor over his harness with yellow and bright metal, he had a bear skin, which was coal black because it was so old. His long hair was combed behind his back, and it shone like raven's feathers. And he has a wreath of gold of huge weight on his head, full of bright stones. So this is the king of Thracia. Has got this sort of really black long hair, but he's got these orange glowing eyes, and he's in a chariot being pulled by 4 white bulls. And then if you look at Emetreus, who's supposed to be the king of India, it's even a little bit odder. With our seat in Stories as Men Find, the great Emetreus, the king of India, upon a bay steed who is wearing steel armor, covered in a cloth of gold, well covered up, he came riding like Mars, the god of arms. His armor was of tarsia cloth with white pearls and round. His saddle was new beaten gold. He had a mantle hanging on his shoulders, which was full of rubies. His curly hair, like ringlets, ran, and that was yellow, and it glittered as the sun. His nose was high. His eyes were bright citron, so his eyes were bright yellow, like lemon yellow. His lips round. His color was sanguine. He had kind of a reddish color, and he had some freckles that were sprinkled, and they were between yellow and black. He had a red face with yellow and black freckles on it. And he looked like a lion. He was 25 years old. He had a good beard. He wore a green laurel on his head, and he had a tame eagle. So Chaucer's idea of an Indian, of someone from India, is that he is blonde, with glowing yellow eyes. He has red skin and yellow and black freckles, and yeah, long curly gold hair. So I think this is Chaucer describing pageantry, and he's trying to make it spectacular, but he also makes these guys from the Middle East and the East really odd looking. I mean, like aliens with these glowing eyes and weird colors. And I think the point, my wife wants to know if our dog needs a new collar. And I think the point of it is, that I'm trying to make anyway, is that Chaucer has no clue what foreigners look like, and neither does anyone else. And this is so early that they know that there is such a place as India, and what they think about people from India is just pure and ridiculous speculation. So anyway, so I think that's what, when I was asking you what you thought about Emetreus and Lycurgus, that the exotic East, I was trying to get to this idea of Chaucer's Orientalism, which is a really early species of European Orientalism. At at the end here, Palmon and Emily have a happy marriage, and the knight chooses to conclude the story in this way. Um, yeah, I think so. I mean, um, their happiness is implied pretty strongly. I find it a little bit difficult to swallow because I don't really think that Emily was going to be very happy with it, and then she has to witness the horrible death of Arcita in front of her as well. But yeah, it does seem as though, and I think the knight probably has it in his interest that the the couple ends up happily ever after. Excuse me. Um, yeah, Becca points out this the potential difference in the pagan versus the Christian view of women, which we don't really get to see, but it's certainly possible that there is a difference. I mean, we would hope that there's a difference. And Susanna sees sees teenage boys throughout here, and these guys. I mean, of course, when it starts out, they're not much older than teenagers, but it passes 20 years. So certainly they can't be accused of being teenagers by the time the story culminates. Um, but yeah, this sort of I saw her first with the idea that it's a competition between the males and that the woman involved doesn't have any say so in it. And it's certainly an immature attitude to have, but hopefully that your teenage boys you have in class maybe in 10 years will have progressed a little bit. We'll hope. You never know. We can only hope for the best. Okay, so now I want to look at Becca's response here. And yes, Theseus pretty much does club Hippolyta over the head and drag her back. Um, and does he seem to be a guy with way too much testosterone? Yeah, I mean he's a warrior king. This is his job description. And I like though that you brought up Parliament of Fowls because Chaucer does present other ways for men and women to end up together besides just out and out combat. I mean, in Parliament of Fowls, at least the lady actually gets a voice and a choice. And there's a little bit of irony in the fact that a bird gets a choice, but this human woman in the story doesn't get a choice. So I'm glad you brought up Parliament of Fowls because it does sort of show. And you'll see, you'll be a lot happier with Chaucer when you get to something like the Franklin's Tale, where there's a lot of equality in marriage. He's actually pretty advanced about it. But here in the Knight's Tale, right, we have a battle with hundreds of men. Although Theseus does make a point at the beginning of the battle to say that he doesn't want anybody to get hurt. Now, people do get hurt, obviously Arcita, but other people as well. But he at least pays lip service to the idea that he doesn't want it to be fatal for too many people. Do you feel sympathy for these guys? Yes and no. Are they cousins or brothers? They're cousins, but they have sworn an oath kind of as blood brothers. But in a genealogical sense, they're cousins. But they sort of teach each or treat each other rather as brothers. Um, bro, is it bros before hoes? Yeah, clearly not. Emily came between them without even knowing this. And yeah, does Arcita fall in love with Emily as a competition for Palamon, or as a reaction to, or if you can do it, I can do it. Um, and I'm sorry about your sister. I hope that you all have outgrown that. But yeah, I think there's at least an element of it. But I think too we're supposed to accept that Emilia is so whatever, she's so spectacular that she would naturally elicit this reaction, and also the fact that they are both noble, that they are both nobility, and therefore they are attracted to her nobility, if that makes any sense. And I kind of think maybe that's going on as well. Number three, I attribute the attitude towards Emily more to the knight than to Chaucer. And you say this because of a pattern you've been seeing in his work. Edgar Allan Poe does like to kill beautiful women. There's a lot in our society that artistically that rides on the deaths of beautiful women. If you think about Ophelia in Hamlet, or if you think about horror movies, this is the great American art form of the slasher film. Um, Part of the reason it exists is so that we can watch attractive teenage girls be slain. And I'm not, I mean, I guess I am trying to be funny with that, but it's also a pretty real phenomenon. Um, and yeah, well, and you watch the news. I mean, we're very fascinated when a beautiful young white girl goes missing. If a middle of the road, 20-something-year-old black man goes missing, we won't hear about it. It's not good news. It's not exciting for the audience. So, uh, yeah, her only charge is to appeal aesthetically and to be a catalyst for the narrator's sense of grief. And you're talking about Annabelle Lee, for example. Um, yeah, she's a very romantic figure, and and her virginity too. I mean, that's part of our thing in horror movies. Is the girl that survives is usually a virgin. That the girls that get killed are the ones who are promiscuous, and there's this sort of weird sensibility that we have that appeals to. And I say we, meaning the culture, hopefully, not me and not you, but from a pop culture point of view, that's a very popular thing. Um, and yeah, the unrequited part is achingly romantic, although it's kind of maybe not particularly kind of realistic. The question number 4 about Lygurge and Demetrius. Yeah, I mean it's very much a catalog of troops and things like that. And you said here it's the same reason I never touched the Iliad, and actually that description is very much taken from things like the Iliad and the Aeneid, where these long catalogs of ships or catalogs of armies or things like that, where people would read for dozens and even hundreds of lines about things that would not normally, um, to us, might not appear to be interesting, but certainly were interesting at the time. Um, yeah, it's interesting that you bring up the Lady of Shalott here because I think it's interesting. I mean, in this context, but also in the context that it's sort of interesting to think about this as a reverse Lady of Shalott. Here we've got the ladies on the outside and the men are on the inside. And so they risk everything or whatever to get out and find a lady, and one of them finds death as a result. So it's almost sort of anticipates the Lady of Shalott, but in kind of a gender bent way. The ending, what do you think about the ending? I can tell by the tone the knight probably thinks this is a wonderful story, because although Emily did have to marry, she married the one who truly loved her. Uh, yeah, I think that's right. I think that the to the knight, this is as good as it gets. And yes, there's a certain amount of sadness to it, but I think he finds beauty in the sadness, and the bittersweetness. So it's a happy ending for the knight. I'm not sure what I think Chaucer is presenting it to us as good but flawed, and then I think for us it is a little bit hard to get really invested in this text. Julie, I can't make your little video play every time I try to do it. It doesn't uh, do right, but I like that uh, uh, you brought up A Knight's Tale, and yeah, I do. I grudgingly like that movie. I like the fact that it doesn't pretend to be accurate. I can't stand the movies that act like they're all accurate, like that King Arthur movie with Keira Knightley, um, and acts like it's somehow historically uh, got something going on. But of course, we know that it doesn't. So I think A Knight's Tale is actually a better medieval movie. And yes, of course, they've got Chaucer as a character there, and um, yeah, it's pretty funny. Um, yeah, it's important to separate in Canterbury Tales. It's especially difficult because you've got to separate the narrator of the tale from Chaucer, the author and narrator. And so you've got sort of two layers to go through. We've got an unreliable narrator in The Pilgrim, and then you have an unreliable narrator um, in Chaucer himself. So yeah, you just have to kind of watch out for it. Susanna agrees um, with what you said about Arcita falling for Emily. And I think that's probably true. Um, Again, I agree with that. The unattainable quality of Emily, it goes with courtly love, and as you pointed out, Arcita waits 1 to 2 years before taking action, and that's kind of the traditional uh, waiting period for that. And as we've seen before, and what is interesting is he is so changed by his pining away for love that he becomes physically and even vocally unrecognizable. So his disguise is not a disguise at all, but it's just the sufferings of love that he's going through. So number 5, yeah, this is once again the poor Lady Eagle. I don't know how much the Lady Eagle wants to be single. I mean, she doesn't let on as much. I mean, Emily definitely. I mean, she's praying at the temple of Diana. I mean, she's praying for chastity. Um, but at the same time, it could be that the eagle wants to remain celibate, or I think she wants to be celibate as long as it's appropriate to be so. But I think her year's waiting period is not to escape, but it's just kind of the conventional checking to make sure that the boys have done due diligence. All right, Callie's response here. Um, right, Hippolyta is a spoil of war, and you got through to the Amazon part, and you've parsed that out well. You felt great sympathy for Palamon and Arcita early on in the tale, as they are imprisoned in exile. They're both heartsick. And yeah, that question, I don't know which one has the worst situation. And there is a point in the poem where, at the end of part one, where you're supposed to pause, and it is one of those love question, the demande d'amour. Which of them do you think has it worse off? The one who can see the woman but can't get to her, or the one who can't see her ever but has his freedom. And I think we're supposed to read these as relatively equivalent. Let's see. Number 3, the knight. Everybody seems to be going with the knight. That this is really his point of view more so than Chaucer's. And you pointed out again that Chaucer certainly does have some women who are allowed to make a choice, even if they're women birds. So I think y'all are on point there. That this is the knight, and remember, it's the knight talking about an ancient society. So there's even a sense that things have progressed since what he's describing. Yeah, number 4. Yeah, and you use your translations, which is good. Those are difficult sections to read. Those battle sections and the parade, and the descriptions of the altars. I think are very. That's actually one of my favorite parts. I didn't give you a good opening to talk about that, but the description of the altars, and especially the altar of Mars. That's one of the most horrifying things that I've read in Chaucer. The child that's being eaten by a sow in the cradle, and things like these horrible ways of death and dying that are kind of unfolded for you. And they're not all related to war either, which I think is interesting. Or they might be collateral damage of war, but they're not just battlefield deaths. They're all kinds of deaths. Um, and I think that's one of the strongest things in the poem is the description of the 3 altars of the different gods and goddesses. The ending is well tied up, you say, yeah. Um, After his death, after the death of Arcita, Theseus suggests the marriage of the other two, which allows Palamon not to look like the bad guy in the situation. Yeah. Well, and remember, I mean, everybody gets their prayer answered. Everybody gets his or her prayer answered. Uh, Except Emily gets half her prayer answered. Emily's prayer was that really she didn't want to be married at all, but if she had to be married to the one that loves her the best. Palamon prayed to be married to Emily, and Arcita prayed for victory in battle. And so he did get that, and this is kind of the deal that Saturn, who comes in at the last minute, works out. He says, "I know a way to make it so everybody gets what he or she prayed for," and it's of course it's like one of these stories where you get 3 wishes and it never ends up in exactly the way that you want. Arcita didn't really. He did want the victory, and I think he's more victory driven in general. I mean, he prays to Mars rather than Venus, which tells you something. Um, but everybody got what he or she wanted, but I'm not sure how happy anybody is. Certainly not Arcita, I don't think. So, um, good. Sarah likes your analysis and is asking about your translations, which I think please feel free to pass that information on. I linked to some translations. I think I've got a list of web resources that are pretty good. But yeah, anything you all want to use is fine. And if you want to ask me about one that you come across, you can ask me. Yeah, number 4, the prince and his cronies. And I thought y'all are reading Demetrius and Lygarge as being sort of poor fighters or didn't come out very well. I'm not sure I read it exactly that way, except that they're both really great fighters, and one did vanquish the other. But it's not. I don't necessarily think that it's a bad thing or that there's something insufficient going on about them as fighters. But y'all may be seeing something that I'm not. Um, yeah, number 5. Right. There's really not a way to end this story with the guys saying, "Hey, why all this fighting over a girl? Let's just be buds again." That die is cast. I mean, if for nothing else than their honor, I think that they have to fight this out. Even if everybody wanted, even if everyone were agreed that the best thing to do would be to give up, they still, for their oaths, couldn't do it. That's just not in their chivalric makeup. All right, Julie's response. Yes, number 1, I don't think we need to go over anymore. Yeah, really, the only thing you feel sorry for these guys for is the fact that they were both in prison for life, and they, and then yeah, right, they're exposed to this beautiful woman with this idea that you can never have this. And here you said having only each other for company is pitiful. The mere sight of a woman is enough to turn these cousins against each other. Uh, but that's courtly love. I mean, I think that the power of simply seeing a beautiful woman is supposed to be enough to sort of change your life for forever, and whether that's in a good way or a bad way. So it is a shame, um, and by our 21st century lights, it's not very mature or wise behavior. But I think that in the courtly love context, it's absolutely what had to happen. Number 3, you think is a tough question. Good, I hope so. Emily's feelings are being ignored, even though she's sympathetically is attributed to Chaucer. So right, so you're saying that this is Chaucer's doing. That there's nothing said about the knight that's unsympathetic to women. Here, if Chaucer were to stay true to his description of the knight, I think the knight would view Emily as a prize. Okay, so I guess really what you're saying is you think that really is more down to the knight, that this is the knight's character. It's within his worldview to sort of see women in this light. Therefore, it's coming from Chaucer, but it's coming from Chaucer in a way that's authentic to the knight. Number 4, the tournament was like the difference between Die Hard and The Notebook. I would like to see those two in a mashup. The Hard Die and Notebook or something. Here Chaucer's idea of the East are interesting to portray Demetrius and Lycurgus as strong, handsome, and wealthy. They're both unseated from their horses, and the image I get, this is all show and no go. Yeah, I mean, you guys are harsh judges of knights here. You're sort of attributing their being unseated to their incompetence rather than the awesomeness of their opponents. But excuse me, but that's okay. And again, they are strong and they are handsome, very wealthy, handsome. If you like flaming yellow and orange eyeballs, in which case they're gorgeous. Does the knight believe that it's just that everyone's prayers are answered? And you said, I don't think this is even considered by the knight. And that's an interesting way to respond to the question. And I think that I think probably you're right. I think that a promise kept or an oath fulfilled is the highest possible good, and therefore, um, right, that these people prayed to their gods. The gods made them promises, and each promise was kept. And so, honor is fulfilled even when the letter of the law makes it a lot less appealing than what people might really have truly been hoping for. But the words are bond, so they have to be fulfilled in the way that they are. Duke Theseus tells Emily, for gentle mercy ought to pass right. Mercy should surpass justice. I guess, but I'm not sure. Not sure anybody gets mercy per se. I guess, well, the Duke has mercy on the two guys because he doesn't have them executed. So that's one example of mercy in here, because they could have both been eligible for the death penalty. Instead, he makes them fight to the death for this poor girl. The person who gets punished is really Emily. As for how I think she should have ended, I don't think Emily should have become as emotional as she did over Arcita's death. I guess. I mean, you're right. She doesn't know him, and I don't think she's necessarily particularly in love with him. I think emotional. I mean, just as sort of a human who's been told that this guy is in love with you, and then he dies this pretty spectacular death. I think it's okay if you're shaken up a little bit by it. But yeah, I think it's not realistic to think that she would have a true wifely kind of attachment to him. And I don't know. I guess her grieving is pretty intense. So yes, Diana comes right. And that's true. That's a good point. Is that when Emily makes her prayer to Diana, Diana comes right there at that moment. It says, "You will not get prayer number 1, but let's talk about prayer number 2." And she's denied her original boon right away. So at least she doesn't sort of live in suspense about it. Yeah, is Palamon the most deserving? And the answer is yeah, probably not. I mean, Palamon prayed to get her, Arcita prayed to win. So sure, they both got what they prayed for. So I don't necessarily think that makes. And Palamon's not the better fighter, as we see in the battle. It's just dumb luck that this. Well, it's not dumb luck. It's sent by Saturn, but it's. Arcita has already won, and then this fury is sent to make his horse rear up, and he's thrown, and he hits his chest on the pommel of the saddle, and it turns him. He turns black and swells up. Apparently, there's some kind of horrible internal injury and bleeding that he dies from. So that's not in the battle. On the battlefield, he was more or less unscathed. So there's no sense of desert here. There's just a sense of I don't know what. I don't even know if I want to call it providence. Right, response to number 4. Becca says, I originally thought the tale was more in the knight's voice than Chaucer's. And again, right, I mean, how much is it Chaucer's voice coming through the knight in an authentic way? I mean, it's really hard to parse this out. It's worth thinking about, but I don't know that we could ever nail down an answer. Susanna. Yes, towers always have window. Well, if you were locked in a tower, you would want a window. But yeah, anytime you come out of the window, and once again, the Lady of Shalott is a good example. I guess Rapunzel does well by going out the window, but she's not an authentically medieval story. Yeah, I think there's all kinds of psychological interpretations of looking out the window, but it's essentially it's gazing upon that thing that you can't have, and what happens when you try to get the thing that you can't have. So good. Number 5, I thought what you pointed out about Diana was interesting. She seems to be toying with Emily. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know whether it is Diana just refusing on her own behalf not to give Emily what she wants, or if it's just that Diana is outnumbered by Venus and Mars, and just is not going to, maybe she does want to have Emily as a devotee, but just can't have it. Diana is interesting and problematic because she's the goddess of chastity, but she's also the goddess of childbirth, and that makes it tricky. Anything that has to do with women's uh, reproductive cycle. She's the god of menses, and one of the reasons that she's represented with the moon a lot is because she has to do with monthly cycles for women and things like that. So it's strange. She's the goddess of chastity and virginity, but at the same time she's the goddess of childbirth. So I don't know if there's also that working, that she's working in the interest of procreation or something to that effect. So I don't know what to tell you. And finally, we've got Susanna's responses here. Right, and Susanna's kind of parsed out the mythology a little bit more. And right, and you bring up Antigone, which I think is a good point. A lot, I mean, the action at the beginning of the Knight's Tale. Remember when the whole motive for the war that gets Palamon and Arcita taken prisoner is the fact that the Thebans have left their enemies dead unburied. And so you've got this line of grieving widows and mothers who they don't, they can't get their men back, but they just want them to be buried. And this is a big deal in Antigone. Antigone is willing to die to try to get her brother properly buried. In the Iliad, there's the section where when Achilles finally kills Hector, he drags the body around behind his chariot in front of Hector's parents. With the hope of shaming them and making it even more intense. And a lot of the last part of the Iliad revolves around the idea of Priam trying to go and get the body of his son back. So, and we're still like that. I mean, Navy SEALs don't leave a comrade's body behind, even if they're dead. That doesn't matter. We don't like to leave our remains are sacred, and we don't just want to leave them to the elements. So, right, the whole impetus of this war to begin with has to do with burying bodies, which is interesting. I mean, it's not and there's really no reason Theseus needs to get involved with it, except that he has a duty when grieving women come and ask him something, then he's got a duty to try to, just as a chivalric person, to try to right their wrongs. So that's not something that we talked about, but it's, and again, here's another example where the pagan nature kind of comes to the forefront. And of course, that's Christian belief too. Nobody would want a Christian's body to lie unburied, but especially it's important with their beliefs about afterlife. Susanna, being the dear sweet person that she is, was able to feel sympathy for Palamon and Arcita. They're locked up and they can only hope out the window. And I think that's a good point, though. I think the idea of this constant hope or constant desire without hope of attainment is pretty torturous. And also, right, she feels compassionate for the fact that through this woman who really they know nothing about, their friendship has been set, which is really the only thing they have. They're in prison together. Certainly, you would want to be friends with the person you were in prison with, and then to make them enemies, that's about the worst thing that could happen to them. And so, as Susanna says, the harmed friendship is in some ways, the most damaging part of what happens. Yeah, Chaucer versus the knight, and you bring out who is the knight's wife? Because we know he's got a son. Is he a widower? He said he just got back from the Crusades and now he's off on a pilgrimage. Can he stay home for 5 minutes? He doesn't seem to have respect for women. Yeah, I guess I didn't think about that. Now he, of course, may be a widower, as many people were. Lots of folks died young, so he might be a widower. And I think there would also be an argument to say that he owes God some fealty and some honor after getting home to give thanks for his survival of battle. But yeah, it would be nice if he stayed home with the little woman for a couple of days first. I don't know if I don't think he's got any real respect for women, but we don't hear much from him about women one way or the other. Um, okay, number four. Talk about the temples. You talk a little bit about the physical beauty of these guys, these Ametreus and Lycurgus. And again, I think they're a little they are physically impressive, but I think they're a little bit weird looking. And then we get into your is this a just ending? Courtly love had nothing to do with intelligence or free will of women and had much to do with them as objects to be won or treated with careful attention. I'm not sure this was much different than tending to a fancy Arabian horse. That's probably a really apt description. One of the things you noticed about Demetrius and Lycurgus is they have one has an eagle, the other one has these bulls, but the idea is that these very noble and fine pets. And I do think probably, yes, that a woman who was a really, quote, good catch was probably regarded in the way that a really beautiful greyhound or stallion was regarded, unfortunately. But I think you're probably right about that. Callie agrees with you about the friendship, and I agree with you too. Why do we not know about the woman in the knight's life? Y'all are very suspicious people. He has a son, but what of a wife? That's a good question. It's like Shakespeare. Go through Shakespeare and try to find the mothers, and you will find them to be conspicuously absent. And when present, they are difficult, like Hamlet's mother. But go through King Lear and try to count the surviving mothers, and I don't think there are any. And that's true of a lot of Shakespeare. Okay, good. So this was a thought-provoking tale, and I know we could probably spend more time on it, The Knight's Tale, but it's a really interesting tale from a formal point of view and from a cultural point of view. It doesn't really have the human pull on us, I think, that some other stories do. I like it, but I like it kind of as a museum piece more than as a living text that I get a lot out of in that way. So anyhow, so thank you for, as always, doing this. I look forward to reading your midterms. I have posted on your assignments page, let's see, I've posted a term paper assignment. The term paper is not due until the end of the semester, but I did want you to be able to start thinking about it. So here where it says term paper prompt, and then I've given you a Turnitin venue for that. And I will be posting an introduction to the Miller's Tale. I've already done the PowerPoint, and I just need to make the screencast and upload it, so you'll get that within a day or two. But I will look forward to speaking with you soon.